In the city of New Kyoto, a king is seeking for a new living sacrifice through a game called the Build Divide, a trading card game. Suddenly, an announcement is sent out to everyone in the city with a notification to declare their participation in the game. 1 week from now at nightfall, we then see a girl being chased in an alley by an older guy. He almost loses her, but he quickly pulls out a playing card and threw it at her, knocking her to the ground. However, the girl manages to use her card to counter his attack and shields herself just in time. She then attempts to escape, but suddenly she bumps into a guy and made his piece of bread fall on the floor. The thug stomps on his bread and tries to attack him, but he pulls out a playing card that summons some sort of supernatural entity, a giant red skull figure with 2 huge wings, which easily killed the thug with just 1 hit. We then learn that the girl's name is Sakura, and she offers to buy the boy named Teruto another piece of bread, in return for helping her deal with the thug. After the incident, they're both sitting somewhere in the city, and Teruto explains to Sakura that the card is not his, and he found it upon arriving in the city. So Sakura explains to the newcomer Teruto what the Build Divide game is. She tells him that in order to live here in the city, he has to know how to be able to play Build Divide, which is ruled by the king of New Kyoto. If he does well in the game, he'll have any wish he wants granted. To fully explain what the game is, Sakura sets up a friendly mock battle between them. She tells him that all these cards with mysterious powers are called Build Divide. It's a 41 card deck, and in the deck it includes an ace card, also known as a territory card, and is the key to any player's victory when playing Build Divide. To start the game, each player will have to activate their scout lens by blinking twice in a row, and then the battle will begin. Teruto makes the first move, and he starts by placing 1 card in the energy zone. After placing down the energy card, he puts another card down that matches the color of the energy card, and places it on the deck. After that, these cards release a unit, which Teruto uses in the attack phase of the game. Sakura tells him that since she has no one defending her on the field, he can use his attack card to damage his opponent. She then finishes by saying that when a player's life bar falls to 0, and they continue to sustain more damage, they lose. That's basically how to play Build Divide. The two continue their mock battle, and Sakura releases her attack unit, and tells Teruto that once both the units or attackers are on the field, they inflict damage on each other according to their power. After playing for a little while, she wants Teruto to understand the true capability of Build Divide, and Sakura finally uses her ace card, Laura. The pair are then transported into Sakura's territory, where she takes the advantage. However, as Teruto prepares his next attack, he seems to be gaining some sort of premonition as to which card to use. Sakura then introduces another type of card, a Buster card, which can sustain additional damage on a player's card field. There are 12 of these cards in a deck that can provide burst triggers. Teruto gets some sort of message saying he must defeat the king. He uses his ace card, Bloom, and finally wins the mock battle. Sakura enlists Teruto's help to join Rebuild, an arena where players stake their right to challenge the king to a Build Divide battle. Since she doesn't feel like she's good enough to challenge the king, she asks for Teruto's help to have her wish granted. Teruto accepts, and Sakura registers Teruto to rebuild. Sakura buys bread for Teruto, who is living in a tent by a riverbank somewhere in the city. After questioning him, it appears that Teruto seems to suffer from amnesia. Sakura brings Teruto to Kamoku Academy, where she also goes to school, after seeing that he's wearing their uniform. However, Teruto really doesn't remember even enrolling in the academy. Just then, a teacher recognizes Teruto and leads him back to class. During break time, Sakura and Teruto meet to discuss a few of the challengers that also go to their school. Before they can even do any scouting on the students, a challenger appears before them. Hiyori Munanashi challenges Teruto to a battle, betting only 1 chip against Teruto. The latter bets all 3 of his chips, despite the risk of losing his right to challenge the king. Hiyori starts with a burst trigger, costing Teruto 2 of his lives. Teruto counters, but only manages to take off 1 lifeline. As the pair continue to battle, Hiyori summons her ace card and activates its territory. Teruto counters immediately, causing Hiyori to lose more of her lives. They go back and forth into attacking and defending their own field cards, and after a grueling card battle, Teruto finally wins against Hiyori. Hiyori cries out after losing, saying it was her only chance to get out of poverty and build a better life for herself. She asks Teruto if she can be his apprentice, and Teruto eventually relents, sensing that he doesn't really have a choice in the matter. Teruto, Sakura, and Hiyori make it to a hideout where challengers roam about. They enter the building, and are immediately shocked by the number of players unconscious on the floor, already beaten out of their betting chips. As the trio try to look for more challengers, they come across a protest that fights against the exclusionism in the Build Divide. It seems that there's great pressure to constantly win in order to provide a nice life for yourself in the city, and if you're not a good player, you're subjected to poverty for the rest of your life. Teruto gets caught in a media interview and gets asked why he wants to win. Confused, he just states he wants to buy bread, presumably because he's standing in front of a bakery. But the reporters have mistaken this to mean that he's living so poorly he can't even buy bread. Teruto then gets pulled away by a mysterious man. Meanwhile, Sakura meets with someone named Ishinome. It seems that this man is an informant, and Sakura asks him who stole all the chips from the hideout. Ishinome hands her a dossier about the thief, Neimitsu and Joe. The picture shows that this guy is the same person that helped Teruto earlier. Elsewhere, Teruto leads Joe to his tent and the pair share coffee together. And Joe asks Teruto what he thinks of the exclusionism, since he doesn't even have a house to begin with. Teruto tells him he doesn't mind, and that he has his own goals to follow. And Joe finally introduces himself to Teruto, before leaving him alone for the night. Meanwhile, Sakura contacts Joe and makes him an offer he can't refuse. Sometime later, Hiyori and Teruto wait for Sakura to show up with the new challenger, and Joe. Teruto again bets all of his chips, and Joe matches the amount. The battle instantly begins, and Teruto immediately takes out 4 of Joe's lives. Joe then asks Teruto why he wants to challenge the king, and Teruto simply answers that he just wants to beat him. This leaves a bad taste in Joe's mouth, as he deduces that Teruto might just want to sit on the throne just like everyone else. Joe uses his ace card, Lionel, and activates its territory, Bottomless Canyon. By doing so, he is able to give all of his units a blitz of 3000 power up. This blitz is a preemptive strike that can inflict damage to an opponent and give them a handicap. Lionel attacks Teruto, immediately casting a burst trigger, and takes away 3 of his lives. Teruto also activates Bloom and its territory, Casino of Fate. With this territory, Teruto is given boosts to exploit some of the cards he's discarded, or guess the cards in the opponent's hands. He brings back a previous card, Nadia, and lets Bloom rest. Nadia shoots directly at Joe, taking away 1 life. Lionel attacks Teruto, but accidentally activates a cursed trump card, who destroys Lionel. Teruto then uses a card which lets him resurrect Lionel to his team. Eventually, Teruto wins. After the fight, Teruto asks Joe why he just doesn't leave the city if he's so fed up with the system. Hiyori lets it slip that outside of New Kyoto, there's absolutely nothing left. Ishinome gets a request from a girl who wants to see Teruto. Meanwhile, Hiyori and Teruto battle some upperclassmen for bread, eventually winning all the goods from the shop. Sakura goes to search for more challengers, unaware that Ishinome was watching the exchange all this time. As Hiyori and Teruto go find more bread, a girl finds and challenges Teruto to a duel, and in exchange, he gets special croissants. Immediately, they are transported to a battle, and the girl traps Hiyori to a pillar. Their battle begins, and Teruto draws Bloom out. The girl also draws her ace card, Margria. The girl also brings out a special card that counts every unit sent her way by the opponent. Every time that happens, she earns 1 conviction counter, which she'll use to activate her final move. Teruto attacks first, but gets a flashback that suggests he knows the girl personally. Teruto draws Bloom and activates the territory, and takes away 3 lives from the girl. However, Margria gets activated, including her territory, Shrine of Justice. Using the 2 coins she earned, Bloom gets restrained from Teruto's deck. During their battle, Teruto keeps getting flashbacks about the girl before him. Meanwhile, Sakura tries to look for Hiyori and Teruto but can't find them. Back in the battlefield, it seems that the girl wants to keep Teruto for herself, apparently obsessed with him, and manages to perform a series of attacks to win the game. Sakura finally appears, and Ishinome takes Kika away. It is revealed that Teruto lost against Kika, his little sister, and the actual king of New Kyoto. Teruto contemplates life while Hiyori and Sakura watch from afar. Meanwhile, Kika is battling with a training doll, but she seems a little unenthused compared to her battle with Teruto. Kika wants to battle Teruto again, but is stopped by Higuma Mario, her right-hand man. Kika then goes to sleep by being wrapped in numerous cables. Ishinome suddenly appears, and promises Mario that he will take care of Teruto, before leaving to go fishing. Teruto is fishing when he's interrupted by Sakura and Hiyori. They persuade him to keep fighting, but Teruto just wants to be left alone. Sakura then takes Hiyori to a cafe for a strategy meeting. Meanwhile, Teruto arrives on the same riverbank that Ishinome is at. They talk about fears and traumas, and Teruto remembers a time in his childhood when he would always lose to Kika in their card game battles. Ishinome suggests that he should stop being a pushover, and to stop running away. Teruto's fighting spirit is finally back. Meanwhile, back in the cafe, Sakura reveals Teruto's location so that challengers will come find them instead and force Teruto to fight. The 2 girls run to Teruto's location to ask him if any challengers arrived yet. Teruto apparently defeated everyone already, gathering 11 chips in total. And Joe meets with his own challengers, a professor and a couple of students. And Joe loses, passes out from exhaustion in front of Teruto's tent, and he wakes up in Sakura's apartment. Daro Kaizen, a professor, beat Joe in a card battle after watching him fight his students first. The trio team up with Joe to beat Kaizen. The trio visit the professor and try to gain some information on him. However, when Kaizen tries to serve the kids some drinks, the cup goes through Sakura's hands, as if she's a hologram. The trio are toured around the research lab, where students study how to use the card's magic for medicine. During the entire tour, Teruto and Hiyori notice that Sakura is gone. Their tour guide says that she's going to be fine, but Teruto immediately notices that something is amiss and knocks out their guide. Enjo arrives at the scene, and the three stumble upon a secret lair beneath the lab. It is revealed that Kaizen abducts people to research the effects of magic on the human body. Meanwhile, Kaizen has Sakura strapped in a chair. Luckily for her, Teruto arrives just in time and he challenges Kaizen to a duel, betting all of his 11 chips. The duel begins with the professor dealing the first attack. This takes away 2 lives off of Teruto. During the whole battle, it seems that the professor already has enough data to defeat Teruto. Meanwhile, Enjo and Hiyori are cornered by the students, but manage to fight them all together. Back in the battlefield, Bloom has been taken out, and Teruto loses 3 more lives after a sequence of attacks. With 2 lives left, Teruto activates the Casino of Fate's ability and manages to bring back Bloom. Teruto uses Bloom's activity to remove cards from the player's cemetery and attacks Kaizen. Finally, Teruto uses his Nightmare card to resurrect a card from Kaizen's deck and uses its own abilities against the professor. Teruto wins, and Enjo takes away the professor's data. Sakura lets Hiyori stay at her apartment, and the two plan a beach trip to relax for a little bit. Once there, Sakura encounters a girl who wants to be acknowledged for some reason, and then gets angry when she doesn't get the attention she wants. Thinking nothing of it, the trio go about their way and jump into the sea. After having fun for a bit, Sakura starts to get cold and uses Teruto's jacket to warm up. Just then, an idol performance starts in the middle of the sea, and it's the same girl who got angry at Sakura earlier. Just then, a heckler interrupts the performance and swims away, but that didn't go unnoticed by Teruto. On the way to buy drinks, Sakura bumps into the idol earlier, whose name is Pyurmi, and they now battle for the last limited edition drink at the beach. The two verbally argue with each other while dueling, with Pyurmi spiraling down into a frenzy, yelling about her career and what she's sacrificed for with each passing turn. Sakura asks the right question, and tells her no one made her choose the path she's on. Sakura eventually wins and even straightens up Pyurmi's attitude in the process. Back in Sakura's apartment, Hiyori is busy braiding Sakura's hair in the hopes of dazzling Teruto. Meanwhile, the boy in question is in a bakery back at the beach. Apparently, the baker there knew him from when he and Kika were children. The woman tells him that he and Kika used to be so close, but Teruto doesn't seem to be convinced. In a flashback, we see a younger, black-haired Kika and Teruto having fun baking and playing together. However, due to their parents' situation, they had to be separated from each other. Kika found out, and the stress of it all took a toll on her. Teruto goes home, but has conflicting feelings about his memory of Kika. Just then, Ishinome appears and transports Teruto into a flashback with Kika in it, and makes Teruto remember who he was before. As children, Teruto and Kika play Build Divide. It seems that the Kika in this memory isn't the same Kika who is the king now. While playing, Kika uses Iora as her ace instead of Margrea. The battle ends in a loss for Teruto, and it seems that this is the first time Teruto lost to Kika. Back as an adult, Ishinome shows another core memory of Kika and Teruto playing, and this time Teruto keeps losing to Kika. Frustrated, Teruto leaves her alone and never speaks nor plays with her again. The stress causes her hair to turn white, and they siblings are forced to separate because of their parents. Due to her insistent begging, Teruto agrees to play one last game with Kika, but Teruto takes Kika's deck and hides from her so he wouldn't have to play with her again. This whole ordeal was the start of Kika's villain origin story. Teruto meets the next challenger, who introduces himself as Mikhail Seiki. The boy instantly kneels in front of Hiyori and asks her to go out with him on a date if he wins the battle. The battle begins, and Teruto, being who he is, bets all 20 chips. Seiki's ace card, Vertiga and its territory, Citadel of Lava and Snow, deals a heavy attack to Bloom. Teruto is eventually down to 1 life left when he summons a card to deal a heavy counter to Seiki's dragon. Seiki's ace card is also attacked, and eventually falls victim to Teruto's Nightmare card. Bloom is the last card to deal an attack, and Seiki is eventually defeated. Teruto gains 20 chips, and now has enough to challenge the king. Seiki leaves, but not before declaring his love once more for Hiyori. Teruto hands the key to Sakura, and Sakura leaves to use the key to have her wish finally granted. On the way there, she recalls the time she came to New Kyoto. As it turns out, she also couldn't remember why she was there or who she was before all of this happened. Ishinome was the first friend she ever met, and he guided her and gave her everything she needs. Sakura recalls the day she battled the king, and apparently, she won, but they couldn't grant her wish in full, so only the non-physical part of her was transported to New Kyoto. Her physical body was stolen by the king, and now she wants it back, though she can't participate in the rebuild battles herself because she's only a soul. Meanwhile, Enjo arrives at the riverbank where Teruto and Hiyori stare at the water longingly and tell him that Sakura has stolen the key. Elsewhere, Sakura tries her chance to battle the king, and Teruto makes up his mind to save Sakura from Kika. Teruto, Hiyori, and Enjo race to save Sakura, but the battle between Sakura Sakura and Kika have already started. Though Sakura does her best to keep attacking Kika's decks, Kika doesn't even seem to be interested in Sakura and the battle, and all she wants to talk about is Teruto. Kika shows off her new territory, which surprises Kika. She takes Iora off of the field and keeps attacking Sakura until she has no units left, but she still has many lives left. Sakura launches combo after combo, but Kika seems to have countered each and every one of those attacks. Eventually, Sakura is forced into a corner, and Kika taunts Sakura even further. As it turns out, Sakura is actually born from Kika, meaning her memories are Kika's memories. But this doesn't deter Sakura from fighting for herself. Outside the building, Ishinome helps Teruto, Hiyoro, and Injo get inside the building. Back in the battlefield, the two girls refuse to give up. Just then, Teruto calls out to Sakura, asking her to stop. If she doesn't, she'll disappear. Teruto refuses to let Sakura go, though. Kika loses her mind over the touching scene and tries to launch an attack, but Teruto stops her. However, Sakura already accepts her fate and disappears into thin air. Teruto challenges Kika to a battle, sibling against sibling. The battle begins between Teruto and Kika. In a flashback, Teruto remembers battling the king once and winning. He gets transported to Kyoto, his wish being granted to him, although he kept fighting Build Divide challenges in Kyoto. After 2 years of fighting, Teruto is taken to meet Mario, who then tells him that he will become Mario's vessel. Teruto runs away, eventually finding himself in a chamber where New Kyoto's main server is. As it turns out, New Kyoto is a virtual city and the residents are inside barrels, whose minds are converted into signals that are transmitted into the virtual city. This virtual city was developed by Mario Higuma. Apparently, the most talented Build Divide players are placed onto the main CPU, and they are fused the program to ensure the stable operation of the city. Although these life forms will be depleted at an accelerated rate. The king is the main CPU and the program itself. The purpose of the Build Divide is to keep the king, main CPU, alive. Teruto sees Kika as the new king, because he chose to be transported to Kyoto. This propels Teruto to go back to New Kyoto and save Kika. Back in the battlefield, Kika and Teruto continue to battle, and Teruto is down to 7 lives. Bloom is summoned, and a new territory is activated, the Tower of Trials. This new ability allows him to add a card to his hand, and add another card to the cemetery, which Bloom can summon later on. Kika also summons her new territory, and uses Margrea to attack Teruto's decoy. Teruto increases Bloom's power and manages to attack one of Kika's cards. Teruto launches a combo to attack Margrea and attack the player simultaneously. This leaves Kika with less than 5 lives. However, Kika also attacks and manages to revive her ace card. Kika tells Teruto that when he loses, she'll lock him inside her, letting Teruto cease to exist. Kika draws one more card and manages nullify Bloom's ability, rendering her useless. Kika launches a combo, hitting Teruto's units, and eventually this leaves Teruto with one last life. As Kika taunts Teruto as he's on the verge of losing, Teruto finally apologizes to Kika for abandoning her. With Teruto apologizing, this seems to shock Kika to the core. Still, the battle continues between Kika and Teruto. With Teruto's cards, he manages to reactivate Bloom and uses her ability to summon a card from the cemetery. After the combo, he takes down 4 of Kika's units. With each passing hour, Kika seems to slowly come back to her old self. Meanwhile, Mario is reveling in the power that Kika and Teruto are displaying. Back in the battlefield, Kika summons a decoy to absorb any attacks from Teruto. Teruto counters this and summons a card that resurrects a dead card that takes away Kika's decoy and removes 1 life from her. The battle is far from over, yet each player only had 1 life left. Teruto loses 1 unit, but Kika is still too strong to defeat. Teruto surprisingly draws Iora and uses her to defeat Kika. Teruto finally confesses that this Iora is from the deck he stole way back when they were kids. Teruto manages to defeat Kika's last unit and uses Iora to attack Kika directly. Kika remembers when she had been offered to the king, eventually becoming the main body. That was when she created Sakura to go find Teruto in her place. Teruto defeats Kika and tries to take Kika away, but the siblings are captured by the king's programs. Bloom appears and severs the connection between the king and the siblings. However, in Kika's place, Teruto is taken, and Joe makes it to where Mario is, presumably to fight him. It is then revealed that Injo was created via biotoken experiments, and calls Mario his father. Bloom disappears, and Kika tries to save her brother. Teruto is eventually taken away into the void. Mario is faced with an infestation threat in the main CPU's program. The future of New Kyoto seems to hang in the balance, as the virtual city starts to collapse. Thanks for watching. Please remember to drop a like and subscribe for more anime recaps. And until next time guys, take care.